Let me please begin my statement by conveying to you and through your behalf to the President of the General Assembly and to the Secretary General of the United Nations our most sincere condolences for the killing today of 20 UN staff members while exercising their duties. This is a dramatic reminder that the UN is not just about talk, but it is about carrying actions on the ground and sometimes at great risk of people's lives. Madam President, the citizen coalitions that form part of Social Watch in over 70 countries take the commitments and promises made by the governments very seriously, and we regularly monitor their implementation and report about outcomes. It is with great sadness that today we have to report that in relation with the 48 countries listed as LDCs, the commitments included in the Millennium Declaration and the Brussels Programme of Actions are not being met. Most LDCs are not on track to achieving the Millennium Development Goals by the target year of 2015, and on a careful look at the three most essential social indicators, infant mortality, maternal health, and primary school, both enrollment and survival, over half of the LDCs for which there are indicators available are either regressing or making no progress at all. Out of 40 LDC countries for which there are data available, 31 did better in reducing infant mortality in the last decade of the 20th century than in the first 10 years of the new millennium. And this is in spite of the MDGs and the Brussels Programme of Action. And this happened in a decade where, before the global financial and economic crisis, in all regions we witnessed unprecedented high prices for the commodities and agricultural products exported by the LDCs. Favorable circumstances of the first 9 years of this decade that just ended did not translate into development, even less so social development. And this didn't happen because the developed partners did not meet their part of the deal. An enabling international trade system, technology transfer, long-term solutions to the debt problem, and more and better aid, all of those were promised as part of Goal 8 of the MDGs, and none of them were delivered. The situation became even worse when the crisis erupted in September 2008, not just because of the immediate and obvious consequences of recession in the countries that used to be the locomotive of the world economy, but also because of collateral damage created by the anti-crisis measures, with unfavorable conditions for migrants, cuts in the aid budgets, a return to tight aid, subsidies to industries and services that are too big to fail, without a corresponding compensation for those that are too poor to fail. Women usually suffer the impact of the crisis more in the effort to substitute with unpaid work the absence or the deterioration of social services. Children deprived now of adequate nourishment and attention will never completely recover later. Armed conflict is an obvious major obstacle, and too many of the LDCs suffer from violence and its consequences. But development is in itself conflictive, and what is needed is non-violent resolution and arbitration mechanisms of those conflicts. Such mechanisms that only a fair and respected legitimate state can provide. Good governance, democracy, the right to associate and to express opinions freely, including by gathering in public squares, is essential in all countries, irrespective of their level of development. Social Watch was created precisely to promote the accountability of governments, without which there is no meaningful citizenship. Every year, our Social Watch member coalitions report on social policies, gender development, and governance and human rights, and we make the link between them. And frequently, we feel very lonely in this task. We signaled loud and clear the development obstacles in the Arab world, for example, and our member coalitions in these days are out in the streets demanding justice peacefully and courageously. But while this happened, both the Human Development Report 2010 and the Doing Business report of the World Bank in that same year ranked Tunisia among the best in Africa. We need a new development paradigm that does not exclude governance, and we cannot claim that we are doing proper monitoring if we are only making a fetish of the wrong indicators. Accountability and good governance is to be demanded also, and probably first, of the powerful countries and of the international institutions. The ease with which trillions of dollars were mobilized to rescue the financial sector after it ignited the global crisis with irresponsible behavior contrasts with the thrift and sluggishness in assisting the vulnerable. Madam President, $1 trillion is a figure that most of us cannot even understand what it is and how big it is. And several trillions were spent in this crisis. In popular education, for example, we try to reach the concept of $1 trillion by saying that if we had $1 for each second, 1 million would take 12 days. 1 billion is more than 30 years. And $1 trillion would bring us back to the times of the pharaohs in Egypt. Now, when we get a sense of the magnitude and the relatively small amount that would be needed to produce, for example, the reaching of the LDCs, some of the people attending the popular education courses concluded if the poor were a bank, we would have been rescued. But in practice, the rescue efforts go the other way around. A few days ago, we were talking with a high-ranking official of the finance ministry of an LDC country, and there we were told how after much sacrifice, the country had resumed economic growth and had now accumulated a solid reserve of over $1 billion. Those reserves, Madam President, are needed because the world finances are volatile, and the countries that open their borders to financial flows need to defend themselves from speculative attacks. But that means that a major proportion of the sacrifice of low-paid workers and the devastation of natural resources, instead of resulting in investments or in social services, is piled up in unused reserves. The poorest countries accumulate treasury bonds of the richest countries. And that is a form in which the poorest countries are providing every day soft loans, very soft loans, to the richest countries of the world. And in turn, that creates the financial bubbles that are going to lead to the next crisis, and they support the unsustainable consumption patterns that are disrupting the global climate and the global environment. In addressing the global crisis, Madam President, and in looking at the impact over countries and people that did the least to create them, the Istanbul Conference provides an opportunity to reaffirm the responsibility of states and of international institutions over those issues where the markets failed to correct themselves and made the problems worse. Reducing volatility and unpredictability in financial markets and addressing climate change with responsibility with a sense of historic justice will simultaneously free domestic resources, reduce risks, and allow to mobilize new energies in such a way that no country and no vulnerable person needs to be left behind. Thank you very much.